Have you ever felt it? That profound, almost aching gap between the life you're living and the life you can so vividly imagine. It's a strange and universal human condition. We can see the person we want to be with perfect clarity. They're healthier, more confident, more financially secure, more fulfilled in their relationships. We can map out the steps. We can buy the books. We can listen to the podcasts. And yet, day after day, we find ourselves standing on the same side of a chasm, looking across at our potential, unable to build a bridge. Why is that? Why is it that some people seem to sprint towards their goals with almost supernatural energy, while so many of us feel like we're running in place, mired in the quicksand of our own habits and limiting beliefs? This isn't a question of intelligence or talent. We see brilliant people who are paralyzed by procrastination and talented individuals who sabotage their own success. It's a deeper puzzle, a question about the very source code of human action. It's a question that obsessed a young man who found himself at the absolute bottom. A young man who was cold, broke, and alone, but who refused to accept that his current reality was his destiny. His name was Tony Robbins, and his relentless, desperate search for an answer led him to uncover a set of tools so powerful they could fundamentally re-engineer a human life from the inside out. This isn't just about motivation. This is a story about discovering the mechanics of the mind and how to become the master operator of the most powerful machine in the universe, you. To truly understand the power of the discoveries Tony Robbins would later share with the world, you have to understand the world he came from. You have to see the desperation that fueled his quest. Imagine a tiny 400-square-foot bachelor apartment in Venice, California. It's not the Venice of trendy cafes and beachfront properties. It's the run-down, forgotten part of town. The young man living there has no kitchen, so he washes his dishes in the bathtub. He's massively overweight, deeply lonely, and working as a janitor. Each day is a battle not for success, but for survival. This was Tony Robbins' reality. He was a man consumed by a feeling of utter powerlessness. His home life growing up had been chaotic and unstable, marked by a series of different stepfathers and a mother who, while loving, often expressed that love in volatile and unpredictable ways. He was living in a state of constant reaction, a victim of his circumstances. The breaking point, the moment that forged his resolve, came on one particular Thanksgiving. His family was completely broke, with no money for a holiday dinner. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. A stranger was standing there with a basket full of food, a gift from a local charity. It was an act of incredible kindness, but for Tony's father, it was the ultimate humiliation. He saw it not as a gift, but as a confirmation of his failure as a provider, as a man. The shame and anger it triggered created a deep and painful memory for the family. But for young Tony, something else was happening. In that moment, he made two life-altering decisions. First, he decided that he would never again be in a position where his family had to rely on the charity of strangers. He would become the provider. And second, he realized that if strangers cared enough to help his family, then he must care about strangers too. He vowed that one day he would be the one knocking on doors, providing for families in need. This single event created what he would later call emotional leverage. The pain of that memory became the fuel for an obsession. There had to be a better way to live. He started reading voraciously, consuming hundreds of books on psychology, philosophy, and self-help. He spent his last $35, money meant for groceries, to attend a seminar by the speaker Jim Rohn. It was an act of pure desperation. And in that seminar, he heard a simple idea that would change everything. For things to change, you have to change. For things to get better, you have to get better. It was the first glimmer of light, the first suggestion that he was not a prisoner of his past, but the architect of his future. He wasn't looking for a quick fix. He was looking for a new operating system for his life, and he was willing to do whatever it took to find it. His journey led him to a then-fringe field of study called Neuro-Linguistic Programming, or NLP. It was founded on a revolutionary premise, that all human behavior, even the most complex and seemingly magical skills, had a structure. And if it had a structure, it could be understood, mapped, and most importantly, replicated. This was the first monumental breakthrough. He realized that success wasn't an accident. It was a result of a specific strategy. If someone, anywhere, had achieved an outstanding result, they hadn't done it by magic. They had followed a recipe. They had a specific set of beliefs, a way of thinking, a pattern of physiology, and a way of communicating with themselves. The key, he discovered, was to stop trying to reinvent the wheel and instead become a master of what he called modeling. Find the best in the world at what you want to achieve and decode their strategy. He became a detective of human excellence. One of the most powerful stories that illustrates this principle involves the U.S. Army. They had a problem. They were trying to teach soldiers how to become expert marksmen, but their top shooters were what they called unconscious competence. When asked how they hit the bullseye with such uncanny accuracy, they'd say things like, "I don't know, I just feel it." They couldn't articulate their process, which made it impossible to teach. Robbins and his team, using the tools of NLP, went to work. They didn't just ask them what they did, they modeled their entire internal world. They found that these expert shooters had a specific internal dialogue. They had a specific way of visualizing the target, making it seem larger and closer in their mind's eye. They had specific beliefs about their own capabilities. They uncovered the full mental and physiological syntax of a perfect shot. Once they had this model, they turned it into a step-by-step training program. They took a group of soldiers who had either failed or were about to fail the marksmanship qualification and taught them this exact strategy. The results were astounding. In less than half the standard training time, this group of underperformers was shooting at an expert level. They had effectively installed the software of an expert into the hardware of a novice. This was proof. Excellence wasn't some innate gift reserved for the lucky few. It was a strategy that could be learned. This principle blew the doors off the idea of limitation. If you want to be a great public speaker, you could model the syntax of a master orator. If you want to be a successful entrepreneur, you could decode the belief systems of a titan of industry. The universal problem of being stuck suddenly had a tangible solution. You didn't have to guess your way to success. You could find someone who had already built the bridge and simply copy their blueprints. But as he began applying this powerful principle, a deeper complication emerged. He saw people who learned the exact strategies of the world's most successful individuals, who had the perfect blueprint, the perfect map, and yet they still failed. They knew exactly what to do, but they couldn't bring themselves to do it. A person trying to lose weight might have the world's best diet and exercise plan, but they consistently found themselves reaching for junk food late at night. An entrepreneur might have a brilliant business model, but they were paralyzed by the fear of making sales calls. It became clear that having the right strategy was only half the equation. It was like having the fastest race car in the world, but with no fuel in the tank or with a driver who was too terrified to press the accelerator. The first principle, modeling, gave you the car, but something else was needed to provide the fuel and the courage to drive it. This led him to the second and arguably more fundamental breakthrough, the science of state management. The deeper truth he uncovered was that our ability to use what we know is entirely dependent on the emotional and physiological state we are in at any given moment. You can have a PhD in communication, but if you're in a state of rage, you won't be able to access any of that knowledge. You can know the perfect investment strategy, but if you're in a state of crippling fear, you'll panic and sell to bottom. Our state is the gatekeeper to our capabilities. And the most empowering discovery was that our state is not something that happens to us. It is something we can consciously create. He distilled the control of our state down to 3 core forces, which he called the triad. The first is physiology, how you use your physical body. Your posture, your breathing, your facial expressions sends an immediate and powerful signal to your brain and nervous system. He demonstrated this with a simple experiment. Try to feel genuinely depressed while standing tall, with your shoulders back, a huge smile on your face, and breathing deeply. It's biochemically impossible. A radical shift in your physiology will instantly shift your emotional state. The second force is focus. Whatever you consistently focus on, you will feel. If you focus on what you've lost, you'll feel grief. If you focus on what you're afraid of, you'll feel anxiety. But if you deliberately shift your focus to what you're grateful for or what you're excited about, your emotional state will follow suit. Focus is a muscle. Where you direct it determines the entire emotional flavor of your life. The third force is language. The words we use to describe our experience don't just label it, they create it. If you have a minor setback and you say to yourself, I'm devastated. This is a catastrophe. You create a biological reality of stress and despair. If you face the exact same setback and instead say, this is an interesting challenge, I'm a bit frustrated, you create an entirely different emotional response, one that is empowering rather than debilitating. This was the missing link. You can't just model someone else's external actions. You must also be able to generate the internal state of certainty, confidence, and drive that allows them to execute that strategy flawlessly, especially in the face of adversity. State management was the key to unlocking all the other tools. It was the master skill. For a time, these two principles, modeling excellence and mastering your state, existed as powerful but separate pillars in his understanding of human potential. One provided the how-to, the strategy. The other provided the power to, the emotional fuel. The grand synthesis, the unifying aha moment, came when he realized they weren't two separate ideas at all. They were inextricably linked in a single, elegant, and dynamic feedback loop. This was the birth of what he called the ultimate success formula, the core operating system for achieving any result. The formula itself is a deceptively simple, four-step process. First, you must know your outcome. Not a vague wish, but a crystal clear, specific, and measurable goal, what you really want. The second step is to take massive action. This is where modeling comes in. You don't just take any action. You take intelligent action by modeling the strategies of those who have already achieved what you want. You learn from their successes and their failures to shorten your learning curve. But here is where the synthesis begins. The third step is to develop sensory acuity, which means paying close attention to the results you're getting. Are your actions moving you closer to your outcome or further away? This step is impossible to do effectively if you are in a negative or fearful state. Fear blinds you. Certainty and curiosity, on the other hand, allow you to see the feedback clearly without judgment. And this leads to the fourth and most crucial step. Change your approach. Be flexible. If what you're doing isn't working, do something else. Keep changing your approach until you achieve your outcome. The reason most people fail isn't that they run out of options. It's that they run out of emotional drive. They get stuck in a state of frustration or hopelessness and give up. The true, unlimited power comes from the realization that state management is the engine that drives this entire formula. Being in a peak state gives you the clarity to define your outcome. It gives you the courage to take massive action. It gives you the acuity to see what's working. And most importantly, it gives you the resilience and creativity to remain flexible, to keep changing your approach no matter how many times you fail, until you inevitably succeed. The grand idea is this. Your resources, money, time, contacts, are never the real problem. The real problem is a lack of resourcefulness. And resourcefulness is a state of mind. It's that psychological condition where you feel that you can make anything happen. When you learn to command your own state, you gain access to all of your personal resources, your creativity, your courage, your determination, your humor. You become unstoppable not because you have all the answers, but because you are in a state where you believe you can find them. This is the ultimate synthesis. Power is not an external thing you acquire. It is an internal state you generate at will. So we've journeyed from a young man washing his dishes in a bathtub, consumed by a feeling of powerlessness, to the discovery of a profound and actionable blueprint for personal transformation. We saw how the pain of his past fueled a desperate search for answers, leading him first to the principle of modeling, the idea that success leaves clues and can be replicated. Then, we uncovered the deeper truth that knowing the strategy is useless without the emotional fuel to execute it, leading to the mastery of state management through physiology, focus, and language. And finally, we saw how these two ideas merge into a single, powerful system, the ultimate success formula, a feedback loop driven by the relentless ability to manage your own resourcefulness. This journey isn't just Tony's story. It's a map for anyone who has ever felt that gap between who they are and who they want to be. The blueprint is there for you to use. First, get absolute clarity on what you want to change or achieve. Second, find a model, a strategy that is proven to work. But before you do anything else, and every day along the way, you must consciously and deliberately manage your state. Use your body, change your focus, and watch your language. This is not a passive act of hoping for motivation. It is the active, daily practice of generating the energy you need to follow through. The greatest tragedy in life is knowing what to do, but failing to do it. The information is meaningless without application. So I invite you now to close the gap. Don't just be a passive listener. Be an active participant in your own life. Pick one area, your health, your career, a relationship, and apply this formula today. What is your outcome? Who can you model? And most importantly, what can you do right now to shift your physiology and focus into a more powerful and resourceful state? If this journey of discovery resonates with you, if you believe that you are meant for more, then join a community of people who are committed not just to learning, but to living these principles. Subscribe to this channel, not for my sake, but as a declaration to yourself that you are ready to stop being a creature of circumstance and start being the creator of your life. Because the power you're looking for isn't out there in the world. It has been inside you all along, waiting for you to awaken it.